The first college football playoff bracket has been released, and man, it is beautiful. But is it fair? It may be for some teams, it may not be for some others. But for Ohio State, their path proves to be pretty challenging. But can they contend in this new 12-team playoff? We discuss all that and more on this episode of the Buckeye Breakdown podcast.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
And welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Buckeye Breakdown podcast. Anthony Moeglin alongside my partner and former Buckeye, Kevin Woidke. And today, the dust has finally settled. No more speculation, no more guessing. We know exactly what this 12-team college football playoff is going to be. And Kevin, man, looking at this bracket, dude, it's everything we've been anticipating, everything we've been expecting. This bracket is awesome, and there's some really cool matchups that we're staring at here and coming down the pipe next week.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there's some great matchups we see, and there's some teams you don't see on there that many people thought, hey, they're going to make it. I mean, I feel pretty vindicated. If anyone's been watching our shows all year, I was very adamant that Miami is not a playoff team, and the committee thought the same thing. And you know, it's nice to see that the SEC bias is kind of starting to leave. You see it a little bit when we're pulling up the bracket, right?
We'll pull up the bracket. Yeah.
You'll see it a little bit later when we look at the bracket. But I mean, you got Texas, and you got Georgia. But after that, I don't think you have anybody else.
Yeah, nothing else. I mean, that's the really nice part is you went into conference championship weekend, and I'd say this: there's some really good things about this bracket, and some things that I think need to be tweaked. And truth be told, like, it's the first year of it, and I think that the intent was to get the top 4 seeded conference champions to be high seeds. Teams that you expected to be there that kind of ran the table, but it didn't pan out that way. There's some teams that kind of snuck in. You talk about Boise State, Clemson, ASU, and all of them are great stories, but they all got top 4, or I guess 2 of the 3 got top 4 seeds, and they may not be, they were ranked in the teens, so that's going to kind of shake things up. But I think that there's some really good tweaks that have to happen. But I do, for the most part, think that they kind of, I think, nailed it. And one thing that I heard today, and as we talk through this, I know there's some people jumping in here to the conversation. We certainly appreciate you coming in and joining Kevin and I tonight. Drop your thoughts in the comments too. I know that there's a lot of opinions out there about what this playoff is. But Kev, it felt like to me that from a committee's perspective, they were a touch inconsistent throughout the year when they did the first 6 iterations of this. They started back in the first week of November, and they were kind of telling you that, hey, we're just going to rank the best teams. And then when this bracket came out, they really just they took the teams that pretty much all played in their conference championships. You talk about SMU. They had that great comeback on Saturday night, almost completed it, but they sneak in over the likes of an Alabama and a South Carolina. You talk about that SEC bias, but there's that one. You get Notre Dame obviously getting in and having a good seed. You got Indiana, who is a low seed. And then you got that conversation between Ohio State and Penn State, where Ohio State beat Penn State in the head-to-head, but Penn State actually ranks a little bit higher than that. So it was kind of an interesting way that the dust all settled and the dice kind of fell. And I think that there was maybe a touch of inconsistency, but I do think that, like, you got the 12 teams that, in my opinion, Kevin, deserve to be there.
Yeah, I think that Drew Aller pass on 4th down for the touchdown is what kept them. Because the committee always says they don't punish people for playing an extra game, which makes sense. But if you get blown out in that extra game, you deserve to be punished. And it looked like Oregon was starting to do that, and they probably would have. They were up 15 points before that play. That was it was a great pass. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it wasn't, but I think that's kind of what solidified Penn State in the spot they have, and arguably the best path to at least the second round, maybe the third round anybody has.
Yeah, and as you talk about that path, let's pull it up here because I think first of all, this is like gorgeous to look at. Like I get so excited, kind of looking at it. But you start in the top left corner. Now, actually, we're gonna wait. We'll talk about Ohio State, Tennessee, because I think that is obviously the big conversation we want to have. But starting in that bottom left corner, Kev, you got that Texas-Clemson matchup where you feel like you go into it that Texas is going to be, they're going to have a huge advantage. I think they opened as 7.5-point favorites. That could be wrong, but Texas hasn't beaten anybody outside of a trip to Michigan. Like that's the only big game that they've won, and Clemson the same. Like Clemson's got a bunch of bad losses on their resume as well. So it's like, that's an interesting one. And then the winner of that one gets a ASU team, dude. That this Scattaboo cat down in Tempe is just out of control good. It's so much fun to watch, and that ASU team is hotter than the hinges of hell right now, and they are just winning big football games.
They are. I mean, the Big 12 was kind of going to be a question mark this year with, Texas and Oklahoma leaving. I mean, you saw it. It was. But, I mean, this Arizona team is spoiler. I mean, you can say they're playing spoiler all year, but, like, they're projected last. They're projected to finish last overall in their conference, and they just won it. And now they get a first-round bye. Can you really call that a spoiler? I mean, they have them ranked as the 12th overall team in the country, which is, I think, just behind – was it Alabama, number 11?
Yeah, Alabama was 11.
Yeah, I mean, it's just – it's impressive to see from it's impressive to see from a standpoint of, this is why I like the conference champions getting in. Do I think they should have been a top 4 seed? No. But I do really like the conference champions getting in and getting thrown into the mix because how I would have liked to structure it is that the rankings were the rankings. Like I think Penn State, Texas, Georgia, and Oregon probably deserve buys. Those 4 deserve to buy, and then rank it all the way down. And then if you're outside the top 12 and you come in and it should have been Clemson correct at 12, ASU at 11. SMU at 10, and so forth. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And you look at it too, like Clemson. Actually, I was incorrect. Texas is an 11-point favorite. But my favorite part about this, Kevin, you look all the way across the board. Every team outside of Oregon has like a questionable bad loss on their resume, right? Tennessee had that loss to Arkansas. Ohio State obviously had that loss to Michigan. Clemson's had a number of losses on their season. Georgia has a 15 and an overtime loss Texas has a 15-point and an overtime loss to the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, kind of didn't limp through the year, but had a really tough schedule. Indiana gets blown out by Ohio State. Notre Dame gets that loss to Northern Iowa. Boise State comes in 11-1 coming from the Mountain West. SMU has 2 losses on their year, one to BYU, who is not relevant anymore. And then Penn State, gets beat by Ohio State at home. So maybe not as much an embarrassing loss, but my point is that every team has flaws. And that's what's pretty exciting about it. And Kev, flipping over to the top right part of the bracket, I know you're not a big Notre Dame guy, but this Battle of Indiana is going to be pretty sweet, and it's going to kick things off. It's that Friday night matchup, and Notre Dame hosting the Indiana Hoosiers, and Notre Dame's a 7.5-point favorite. That one's going to be an exciting matchup too.
I think so. I think that this is when I talked about SEC bias. This is where I see it because ESPN wanted there to be a chance of an SEC college football playoff championship, and truth be told, Georgia's side of the bracket, they obviously play a Notre Dame team that's very talented, an Indiana team that we saw all year. Both those teams haven't had the strongest schedule. Then you go down to the bottom right corner of the bracket, and that's kind of a toss-up. I think you're probably going to see Georgia, Penn State. If I'm being honest, if Penn State doesn't pull the typical James Franklin loss, but I think
be nice.
I'm trying to, but you're probably going to see Notre Dame. Or truthfully, you're probably going to see Notre Dame win that game. Indiana's a good team. I just don't think they're there yet. I mean, you saw it against Ohio State, against a blue caliber team. I was truthfully hoping SMU would drop to the 10 seed and Indiana would go to 11 so we could finally see Penn State, Indiana. That would have been a chef's kiss because both those teams were talking about how they were better than the other all year. And but they chose not to. And I think an SMU Notre Dame game would have been a great game too.
I totally agree. And that IU Penn State game would have been a ton of fun. And dude, what I love about it most is that each of these first rounders, like this is my favorite part about it. Each of these first round games is going to be played at each team's home stadium, right? So coming into the Horseshoe are the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, this is a matchup that's only happened one other time in football in college football history, and this was way back. I believe Peyton Manning was the quarterback back when it happened. But Kev, this matchup between Ohio State and Tennessee in the Horseshoe is like football nirvana. It's two of the most storied brands in college football. Some awesome football has been played on both sides of the ball, and that stadium on Saturday night, 8 p.m. is going to be absolutely rocking with some crazy Southerners coming in to take on angry and frankly pissed off Ohio State team that's got something to prove.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee has been a phenomenal team this year. They've had their freshman quarterback, have some freshman quarterback moments. Just realizing now my hair is absolutely crazy. And then, their defense has been stellar all year. It's really been the tail of their defense. I think it'll be a really, really good battle. I think that where we need to take advantage in this game will be in the takeaway market because I could see their quarterback. I'm going to butcher his last name. Nico. We're just going to call him Nico.
Let's call it. He's Nico.
He's Nico. I could foresee him early in this game having some big moment jitters and going from there. But that's where I think we're going to need to take advantage of him. Get him off his spot quickly. Get some pressure on him. And if Ohio State can bring the fans that they brought to the T. North game to that first playoff game and showcase why teams won't want to come play at the Horseshoe in December. I mean, Tennessee is not a warm climate. It's not like SMU going up to Penn State, but
sure.
It's definitely going to be a challenge for the Volunteers. That's for sure.
It really is. And Tennessee's year this year has kind of been up and down. Like you said, it's been a lot. It's really been the story that it's been the story of Nico. If he plays well, they play well. If he doesn't, they really struggle. And you look back at their schedule, they have a 40-point win against then-ranked NC State, and then they dropped 71 on Kent State. That was a wild one. But Oklahoma, we know what Oklahoma became throughout the year. They only beat Oklahoma by 10. They lose to Arkansas by 5. They only beat Florida by 6. They beat Alabama by 7. They beat Kentucky by 10. They beat Mississippi State pretty handily, but Georgia gets them by 14. If you remember that game, Georgia was able to really out-physical them. And then they take care of UTEP. And then they only beat Vanderbilt by 13. There was obviously some big plays in there. And so, like, when you read through that schedule, outside of their kind of their bye games or those cupcake-style games, like, they were in every single game. They weren't really blowing out great competition. And I think the same kind of can be said, Kevin, for Ohio State too, especially as we got towards the end of the year. You think back to the Nebraska game. You think back to even the Purdue game where things didn't look the way they were supposed to. Then obviously the team up north game obviously didn't go the way that it was going. So, like, how is this Ohio State team going to respond to this? Because I think that, these two teams, Tennessee and Ohio State, I think are the perfect matchup. I think they're matched up pretty evenly. And this Ohio State team's got a lot of soul searching, I guess, to do it. Like, because it could go one of two ways. They could come out really pissed off, or they could come out like dead as a doornail and get run out the gym.
Yeah, I foresee, especially how that game ended 2 Saturdays ago. They're going to come out firing. They're going to come out upset. They want this Oregon team again. I think it's pretty clear. Almost so much so that I saw people talking about how we might have looked ahead 2 Saturdays ago. I don't know how that's possible, but that's what they were claiming. We tried to out physical them. This is a team that you gotta be, if you're Chip Kelly or if you're Ryan Day, you go in with a game plan. If you want to go in with your non-bread and butter game plan and see if it works, great. But you have to have the self-composure to pivot back. We have the best wide receiver in the country. Then we have 3 top 15 wide receivers in the country in terms of just straight skill. I mean, we have a duct tape and sticky tack offensive line getting held together, and it like you want to give them the best option, and it's obvious that this offensive line is from 2 Saturdays ago way better at passing the ball than running the ball.
Yeah, and we'll get into the matchup more as we get closer. But one of the big strengths of this Tennessee team is their defensive line. They have a really, really good defensive line. And frankly, it's going to be really similar to the way Team Up North came in, and they're going to try to dominate the line of scrimmage and do that. So, like you said, they cannot be stubborn. Like, this has to be one where they look back and they're like, all right, we learned our lesson. We were stubborn against the team up north. It bit us in the butt. We cannot stick to that and be real stubborn. But what the one, I guess, silver lining to all of this is that if Ohio State can run the table here and make a run, you know, you're going to have to go through Tennessee. You're going to have to go through Oregon. Then you're going to have to go through potentially Texas, and then probably Georgia, Penn State, or Notre Dame, whoever 3 get out of there. Like, that's a gauntlet of a stretch, and that puts whatever happened in the past a little bit into the rearview mirror and tries to bury that. Because if you're able to pull 4 off against those guys, like that puts you back into the conversation of one of the great teams of all time.
I agree. I think that Oregon, as well as I am, is frustrated that there isn't reseeding, because they objectively have the hardest path. If they they will have the hardest first game of anybody, followed by, depending on who comes out of that bottom left quadrant. If it's Texas, Oregon will have had the toughest path by a mile of anybody. And then you look at number 2, Georgia, or number 3, Boise State, and it's like, okay, that's kind of a cakewalk. If you're looking at the number 1 seed and number 2 seed, just the left and right side, you have heavy hitters on the left. You have Ohio State, Tennessee, and then you have Clemson, Texas. Only 2 of those 4 teams move on to the next round. Great. It's Ohio State, it's Tennessee, both blue chip, blue blood programs in college football. Then you go down, it's actually polar opposites. You have the best orange in college football in Tennessee and the worst orange in college football in Texas. Texas has had an amazing year this year. They haven't played a whole lot of people, but you know what? You do get to pick your schedule. You don't get to pick your conference schedule, and they've played well in the SEC. And dabbling with that Clemson team, they've underperformed the last few years, but that's not because they aren't getting talent. I mean, they have talent. They can pull one out. And then if you're Oregon and you're looking at Arizona State or Clemson or Arizona State or Texas, and you're like, all right, well, we're probably going to have a tough game next week. And then you're like, wait, who do we play this week? And they see either Ohio State or Tennessee. I mean, Oregon looked amazing against Penn State. They really did. But it's not easy for them. Like, Penn State plays SMU and then Boise State. Georgia plays either Indiana, Notre Dame, and then the winner of the bottom right quadrant, which is easily the weakest.
Good. And I would add this too. Like, if we look at the left side, you look at that, just the left side in general. Like, if you're Oregon or Ohio State, right? Whoever comes out and gets to that semifinal, like, you don't want to face Arizona State right now. Like, regardless, you face Texas or Arizona State, I don't think you're pumped either way. Like, Arizona State is crushing people. They dog walked Iowa State. Like, that was not – it was from the rip, like, not a game. They dog walked Arizona the week before. They hardly beat BYU a few weeks back. But, I mean, they've been thumping teams. They don't leave anything to doubt. And that's a game that, you face a team that's hot like that. And you're like, I don't know. I don't really want to get in their way because they seem to be kind of steamrolling and playing really, really well. It's going to be fun, man. It is going to be so much fun. And I do think, Kev, like, you're going to learn, I think, committee-wise and, like, format-wise, they're going to learn a lot from this year, because I think in theory it was like, this is going to be great. You get the top 4 seeds are going to be some collection of teams within the top 8 to 10. But instead, you got two teams in there that were outside the top 12 before games kicked off on Friday night when Boise played, and now they're kind of forcing it in there. And you get Clemson, who was in the 20s down there. You get SMU. Like, I don't think it shook out the way that they may have envisioned, but I do think in the future it'll change a little bit for the better, where you can bring something in, kind of like you mentioned, like a reseed or even just, hey, let's go straight up. You win your conference, you're in, and then it doesn't matter. 12 plays one, 11 plays, that type of deal. So I don't know, man. I think it's going to be I think it's going to get really good and be really fun. So what is, out of all the things that are about to happen with this college football playoffs, what's the one thing you're most looking forward to in this new format?
In this new format, it's nice to see teams that are playing well but don't have great schedules and don't have great wins get a chance to compete. I mean, I don't live in Indiana, so I have no idea, but like, I feel like Notre Dame probably big brothers Indiana for the state of Indiana, so I feel like that'll be a really good game. It's the highest priced playoff game by tickets because, well, one, Notre Dame doesn't have a big field. Two, it's just going to be tough, and it's a playoff game at Notre Dame. That's happening, I believe, Friday the 20th at night.
Yeah.
So a night game. The upside for Indiana is they're used to playing in these conditions. They're used to cold weather, but the downside is it's night at Notre Dame. They have that lady with the beautiful voice singing "Here Come the Irish, Notre Dame," and then shipping up to Boston plays. It's an unreal atmosphere to be a part of, unreal atmosphere to be at. I was there once, won a game, got out as a fan, not as a player. I wish as a player. But Kyle McCord won us that game somehow, some way. And
McCord.
It'll be, I think that if we're talking about what I'm most excited about the format and the game I'm most excited to see is going to be Indiana Notre Dame, to see if Notre Dame is soft or to see if Indiana played the cupcake schedule, because both people were accused of playing cupcake schedules all year.
Yeah, no, it's you make a really good point. My favorite part about this whole thing are just the home environments. Like, each one is going to make it their own. Ohio State, obviously, we get the night game on Saturday night with the A team on the call. So like, that's going to be really cool. You're going to get a home Happy Valley, and like, maybe it's not the best matchup with SMU coming into town, but like, it doesn't matter. It's a playoff game in Happy Valley. That environment's going to be sweet. Notre Dame, obviously, everything you said, and then that last one down in Texas is going to be really cool. Those are two massive brands. Like, we're talking about Ohio State and Tennessee being two huge brands. Clemson and Texas are equally big, and that one is going to be spectacular. And then the winner of our game does get to go to the granddaddy of them all. He does get to go to the Rose Bowl, so that's pretty damn sweet. And did you ever play in the Rose Bowl?
I did. Played Washington and won. And the nice thing is, if we end up winning this game against Tennessee, it will be an old school Rose Bowl battle of Pac-12, former Pac-12, now Big Ten, versus a tried and true Big Ten game, a Big Ten team in Ohio State. It'll be fun. Neither of these two teams are new to the Rose Bowl. Let's put it that way.
Would be awesome. It's going to be an awesome environment. It'll be really sweet. So a ton of really, really good coming up in the college football playoff. That's in 2 weekends. Kevin, I'm putting you on the spot here. We got the best game, the coolest college football atmosphere coming this Saturday. It's the Army-Navy game. What side do you fall on? Who do you root for in the Army-Navy game?
I go Army. I got a buddy who just graduated from Army. We have some family friends that were the Navy side and lived in Annapolis. Unbelievable atmosphere there. I love that. But if I had to pick one, I had to recency bias maybe. I prefer the colors a little bit more at Army than Navy. Actually, John Carroll has similar colors to Navy.
Yeah, they do.
But I do. I love Army. I love their team this year. And it's a converted middle linebacker at quarterback. I'm a big fan of Army. I'm excited to watch them play. Watch the big boys get after it. Watch the atmosphere. It's gonna be a blast.
It's always the best, man. It's watching that game is always, for all the reasons, right? And you got two really good football teams this year. Navy 8-3, Army 11-1. I'm on the other side of things, and seriously, not for just to be devil's advocate, but a buddy of mine played for Navy. Guy I played with in high school played for Navy. So became a big fan back then. And like you said, that blue and gold is pretty sweet for me. So It's Army versus Navy on Saturday. It's Army versus Navy inside the podcast here. But it'll be fun regardless, and a really great college football atmosphere. And that is the appetizer for the first ever 12-team playoff, one that's going to be really exciting and has the eyes of the nation on it. So from a content perspective for the rest of the week, we'll be back with you on Thursday, talking through and getting everybody set up for next week. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Got a bunch of content that comes your way throughout the week. And then obviously when the Ohio State Buckeyes are playing, we'll have a bunch of game day content, both pre and post game. So hit that subscribe button there, hit that like button if you like what we're doing. We always do appreciate you jumping in and hanging out with us. Also head over to our website, si.com/college/Ohio State for all of our content, all of our written content. I know our team is working really, really hard to keep that full and keep you fresh for whatever you may need. But we finally have what we've been waiting this whole season for, that first 12-team playoff bracket. And I think Ohio State has one of the tougher roads, but if they can get out of this first round, they have a rematch with the Oregon Ducks, one that they would feel pretty good about heading west to take them on again. For my partner, Kevin Woidke, I'm Anthony Moeglin. Thanks for hanging out with us on this episode of the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast.